Huge breaking news this afternoon and a Sky Sports News exclusive. The proposed takeover of Newcastle is off. The Saudi-led investment group and their partners have withdrawn their offer for the club. The funds say the decision has been taken due to the prolonged process combined with the global uncertainty around long-term investments. Contracts were exchanged 17 weeks ago on a £300 million deal with the Saudi Public Investment Fund, PCP Capital Partners, and the Reuben brothers. Now, the investment group issued the following statement: with a deep appreciation for the Newcastle community and the significance of its football club, we have come to the decision to withdraw our interest in acquiring Newcastle United Football Club. We do so with regret, as we were excited and fully committed to invest in the great city of Newcastle and believe we could have returned the club to the position of its history, tradition and fans' merit. Unfortunately, the prolonged process under the current circumstances, coupled with global uncertainty, has rendered the potential investment no longer commercially viable. To that end, we feel a responsibility to the fans to explain the lack of alternatives from an investment perspective. As an autonomous and purely commercial investor, our focus was on building long-term value for the club, its fans and the community, as we remain committed to collaboration, practicality and proactivity through a difficult period of global uncertainty and significant challenges for the fans and the club. Ultimately, during the unforeseeably prolonged process, the commercial agreement between the investment group and the club's owners expired, and our investment thesis could not be sustained, particularly with no clarity as to the circumstances under which the next season will start and the new norms that will arise for matches, training and other activities. As often occurs with proposed investments in uncertain periods, time itself became an enemy of the transaction, particularly during this difficult phase marked by the many real challenges facing us all from COVID-19. We feel great compassion for the Newcastle United fans, with whom we shared a great commitment to help Newcastle United harness its tremendous potential and build upon its impressive and historic legacy while working closely with the local community. We would like to say that we truly appreciated your incredible expressions of support and your patience throughout this process. We are sorry it is not to be. We wish the team and everyone associated with it much good luck and success. Right, well, Kaveh Solhekol joins us on set with a little bit more about this. This was, of course, a Sky Sports News exclusive. We're the first to bring you the news, the first to bring you that lengthy statement as well. Kaveh, why was this takeover in doubt from the start?
Well, I think the first thing we should say is just to explain why Newcastle United fans feel so deflated this afternoon. If this takeover had gone through, they would have become the richest club in the Premier League. The Saudi-backed takeover, when you look at their wealth, they would have been 15 times richer than Manchester City, for instance. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is worth 30 times more than Roman Abramovich. So this is what Newcastle United and their supporters have lost this afternoon. Now, as you rightly said, this proposed takeover has been fraught with problems and difficulties from day one. Why is that? Well, simply because football is a global business. This was not a simple football deal. This was almost a country buying a football club, and that country is Saudi Arabia, and it has some very controversial laws, and it has a pretty poor record by Western standards when it comes to human rights. So the problems to begin with, there were two main problems. The first one was to do with human rights. The second one was the whole issue of piracy. When we're talking about human rights, for instance, we need to talk about the case of the dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who 2 years ago, he was a journalist based in Washington. He walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to get some paperwork signed off to do with his marriage. Inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, he was murdered and dismembered. Now, according to the United Nations, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, who is also in charge of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which were going to own 80% backing this takeover, he was individually liable for this murder. This murder was big news all over the world. People were asking, is he really an appropriate person to own a football club? Obviously, that is one of the things the Premier League have been looking at to do with their owners and directors test for the past 16 weeks. The second issue, as far as the Premier League are concerned, is piracy. Now, in the Middle East, in that region, the rights to show Premier League games are owned by a broadcaster called beIN Sport. Now, in Saudi Arabia, beIN Sport is blocked, and Premier League games have been shown on a pirate network called beOutQ. Now, the World Trade Organization believes that beOutQ is backed by the Saudi government. So yet again, you can see problems. Would it be appropriate for a government, a country who are showing Premier League games illegally to also own a Premier League club? So those are the two main issues from day one: human rights and also piracy. Now, we've seen this afternoon that the consortium have backed out. The paperwork was lodged with the Premier League 17 weeks ago, and the Premier League still has not given the go-ahead for that deal to go through. So what appears to have happened is that the consortium have run out of patience, and that is why they've pulled out of the deal, and that is why they released the statement that you read a few minutes ago.
Let's talk to our North East reporter, Keith Downie. Keith, I know you're not a Newcastle fan, but this news probably has made your life very difficult up there. Have you heard anything from the Premier League or indeed from Newcastle?
Well, Tom, obviously this news has just come as a flash. I think a lot of us were kind of half expecting potentially one of the two parties to pull out, given the length of time this had gone on. 17 long weeks the Newcastle United fans have been waiting. We even heard yesterday from a couple of local MPs here who wrote to Richard Masters, the Chief Executive of the Premier League, asking him to make a decision because it was affecting the supporters' mental health. That is the state it has got to up here in the North East. We have contacted Newcastle United for comment in the last half an hour since we broke that story at 3:30. And I can tell you that a high-level source at the club has told us that nobody at Newcastle United were aware at all that this news was going to break today, including the person that is handling all the affairs with regards to the takeover. Now, there's a bit of a misconception that it's Mike Ashley who is handling things, all things takeover concerned, but it's actually his trusted Lieutenant Justin Barnes who has been doing that. And Justin Barnes himself was unaware that this news was going to break, and only learnt of that when they saw the news flash up on Sky Sports News at 3:30 just half an hour ago. We've had no confirmation, interestingly, from the Premier League as to whether this would have passed or failed. I think we will never know whether this takeover, this £300 million plus takeover, would have passed or failed by the Premier League. And in many ways, it's stopped them making a decision. Obviously, they've sat on this, Tom, as you know, for 17 weeks now. It looked as though a decision for them was going to be very difficult. So in many ways, with the Saudi-backed consortium pulling out of this, it's kind of made the decision for them and made life, a little bit easier. Just also on something Kaveh said a moment ago, talking about them being the Saudis would make Newcastle the richest club in the Premier League with 15 times the wealth of Manchester City. I've always been unsure from the start, if I'm honest, as to the level of backing. And whenever we've spoken to the would-be buyers, whenever we've spoken to anyone involved with PIF or PCP, they said that they were going to build Newcastle United up slowly and not follow the identikit way that Manchester City have. So it would have been interesting to see. I think the Newcastle United fans were dreaming of it happening, even when the news that Henry Maurice, the American millionaire, was plotting a bid to buy the club a few weeks ago was announced. all the supporters I spoke to at the time said, oh no, he's not got enough money to buy Newcastle United. It's the Saudis they want. Now they became attached to this dream. They were living by it. They were desperate for it to happen. It is the worst news that they could have had this afternoon that the Saudis have pulled out. So a lot of people questioning now, is the takeover definitely off? Well, it has to be off, because without a buyer, a willing buyer and a willing seller, this isn't going to happen. And sadly for the Newcastle United supporters, the willing buyer has just pulled out.
Yeah, that's even more interesting, isn't it, Keith, that no one at Newcastle expected this to happen today. Keith, thanks very much.